Hey everyone, we're back again and we're staying big with virtual event platforms. This week we're talking about Intrado, which also kind of leads into INXPO and Entrato Studios. So let's start there. Juan, tell us about what Intrado is and where people would come into contact with INXPO.
So Intrado is a parent company that makes INXPO. So they have been in the broadcasting, like webcasting business for a while. And then just a couple years ago, it was 2018, they purchased INXPO, which is their more virtual event conference oriented software. And they also pair it with their Intrado Studio, which is an amazing webcasting tool that we will get to chat more about during this review. But yeah, so we have one company, just Intrado, and two different products they make on the virtual events broadcasting world.
It's all things media. So they do much more than virtual events. So what we really like about Intrado as a whole is they're so well versed and at such a larger scale of virtual environments and virtual media that really like the application of what they do as a core business in Intrado is almost secondary to the functionality of INXPO. So if you're in a situation where you're doing a very large scale event and you find that you need someone to make sure that all of the streaming is vetted properly and you're gaining really minute details on your attendees and the analytics and tracking that information, Intrado it basically has that built in for you. So speaking of virtual environments, Lauren, talk through a little bit about what people can expect when they're starting kind of their event planning process.
Yes, so there are two different ways that you can structure your event. There is the essentials route, which looks essentially like a website, sort of like your launch pad if you have a Mac, when you like kind of hover over and it has all those different areas. So there's the sticky notes, there's calendar. It kind of looks like that. It's like a bulletin board website. So you can have live streams, you can have chat rooms, you can have, you know, if there's like notes or something that you need your participants to have, that's all kind of on this dashboard that they call the Essentials Pack. The other option they have is the Virtual Event Expert, which is similar to vFairs and offers that kind of Sims-esque environment. So recreating like large trade shows, you know, job fairs that large universities might be having, and you can sell those booths, create those booths to kind of give that in-person experience virtually. So just two different options. Like I said, the virtual expert one is more for larger scale events that would be having, you know, different vendors at different booths, whereas the essentials is more of like, I kind of see it like a classroom or a smaller scale conference where you kind of like know everybody by name, that kind of thing. So just two different options for different events.
Definitely, and kind of comparing and contrasting vFairs a little bit with INXPO, I think as a whole we felt that it was just kind of a more high-touch environment. Just the renderings felt a little bit more organic. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, you can have more control over it. I know one of my issues with vFairs was that it was very hands-off for the like event manager, designer, whoever's there. You kind of just pass it off to vFairs professionals. But an expo is more hands-on. You can outsource it if you want, if you don't have the ability to design it. But you can also take that on yourself with different branding elements, you know, deciding what you want the booth to look like. So that's one thing that I liked about it. It's a little more hands-on.
Cool. And talking through just our rundown, so as a whole, the ease of use, I went the route of the user experience. We didn't get to see a whole ton of the back end just because unless you're engaging with an actual event, they're a little bit close-fist on the materials that they're sending out. But For the user experience, you can really tell that they put a lot of thought into making sure that the navigation and accessibility. In the demo that we watched, they were talking about simulcasting in multi-languages for any pre-recorded content that exists out there, which is huge. You know, you think about these large tech companies, and you have you know, attendees from all over the world, and you might need to simulcast in 4 or 5 different languages. For them to be, again, that media company first, and then applying those tools into a virtual event environment makes them, you know, very, very focused on the user experience. So we gave it a 7 out of 10 for the customization, or I'm sorry, the ease of use capabilities. Like you said, Lauren, the customizations, I think, are pretty endless. So we gave it a 10 out of 10 just for some of those things that you said, where really the sky's the limit with a virtual event expert, where if you wanted to literally take a rendering of your trade show floor from any of the hub event that you did from the conference last year, they could mimic that in a you know, 2.5 dimensional rendering and customize all of those booth options as well. So very, very like you dream it, they build it, and it's to that level where it does feel curated. And I think that was the big difference for me between the VFair's larger scale, you know, conference rendering and INXPO, is that it just feels cleaner, smoother, and more curated for the content. Juan, talk us through a little bit of security. We gave it a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, so this was more related to, it's kind of like a good and a bad thing they have. They offered this incredible amount of insight onto your event attendees, whether it's what other windows they were visiting, what areas of the event they went to, like technical details on their devices, their connection. It even went as deep as like figuring out what version of the OS they're running. And that's where my security like bell went off. I don't know if I want that amount of information, and I want that amount of cookies and trackers onto my users' computers as a system administrator. While I see how great it can be for sales and marketing, it's a very sensitive area for security and system administrators. So just putting that out there.
Definitely, and yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword, right? Where it's great to be able to pinpoint that this attendee had connection issues because their bandwidth wasn't strong enough to support the stream, but it's also like how transparent with that information you want to be with your attendees, that we're collecting all of this data about you behind the scenes because you clicked OK on allowing cookies, you know. So yeah, to that point, it's great, and it's also terrifying. And then following that up with integrations, we gave it a 7 out of 10 because of a lot of the robust multicasting and streaming capabilities. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so their integrations are great. It's more so because it requires you to get with them to, these are not out of the box integrations. A lot of it will require some custom code. So it's more because it's not something as a user you can set up quickly. Now, it is a very powerful, I think their biggest integration is probably the Intrado Studio. It's a platform I am in love with when it comes to multicast and mixing different like streams and a presentation, live video, transition between speakers. It really makes it seamless on the user side, no matter how complicated it is on the background.
Price-wise, this is one area that, while yes, we gave it a 6 out of 10, it's worth expanding on because I think it's all in the perspective of your pricing, right? So if I am a virtual, or I'm a live event producer and I'm moving from a conference center, you know, that I usually pay multiple millions of dollars to produce this conference, and then I'm moving that into a virtual only environment, or I'm scaling way back and then just doing a hybrid model of a very small in-person scaled event that supports the live content and the live streaming, but the majority of our attendees are coming virtual. It's a digestible cost. But that being said, it's still, if you're creating a virtual event from ground up, it's a huge expense. So the Essentials starts at around $25,000. with the virtual event expert coming in at around 50, but they mentioned that it's very easy for them to have $250,000 to a $500,000 event. And that's where we get into all of those customizations of the trade show floor and your hub and your general session areas and the integrations that you're talking about. So if you're going to double down in this software and you're kind of going from big into virtual, it's digestible and we would highly recommend it. But if you're building from the ground up, it might be worth considering year 1, year 2 until you start to get that traction, another software that's at a lower price point. Awesome. And then overall rating, we gave it a 8 out of 10. So comparatively, for the caliber of event for the enterprise level software that INXPO and Intrado delivers, we really thought that it supported the price and all of the features. Any last thoughts on the experience as a whole, Lauren?
I think there was one thing that I thought was really interesting is that you can cast to Apple TV and Roku on,
oh yeah,
which I hadn't seen before. So I thought that was cool.
You can also stream to Twitch. For anybody who has been on the streaming space in the last couple of months, Twitch kind of got out of the gaming space into like, it's good for any sort of streaming. So it's really, really good to see that Entrato kept up with that and added Twitch to their dock of available platforms.
Yeah, so for a media first conference approach where the branding, the imagery, the sponsorship all come into play, and we're talking a large caliber virtual conference, we would highly recommend exploring Intrado.